Bhagavad Gita has 18 chapters, and the entire text of Bhagavad Gita is in the form of shloka, what we call as verse. The entire text of Bhagavad Gita is in the form of shloka. The same way, the text of yoga, what we call as the Yogasutras of Patanjali, written by the sage Patanjali, is in the form of sutra. Sutra, what is the meaning of sutra? Sutra means aphorism, what we call as formulas. You have this mathematical formulas you would have used when you were in your school or college. Just one formula, if you know how to apply the formula, the problem gets solved. The same way, the entire text of Yoga Sutras is in the form of sutras, formulas. 196 sutras, 196 formulas, divided into 4 different chapters, what we call as pada. We call this as 4 different padas. So these 4 different chapters, what do these 4 different chapters talk about? These 4 different chapters talk about the evolution of man, like how after you take birth, you take few years to take your first step, and then you become a kid, then you reach teenage, and then you turn into an adult, and so on and so forth. The same way, the entire text of the yoga, which is in the form of sutras written by the sage Patanjali, hence it's called as the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, explains the evolution of an individual, like how one can evolve on the path of yoga to become spiritually inclined inwards. So the entire text, they tell you about, okay, what are the practices that you have to do, because you want to know what the text has to offer right before you even decide to jump into it. So the entire text of the Yoga Sutra helps you evolve as a person. It helps you to understand your mind, or most importantly, let's not even get into the mind. It helps you understand your consciousness. So consciousness, when I say individual consciousness, mind, intellect and ego, these 3 combined together is what we call as consciousness. So you understand, or if not, you get a better insight as to what your mind, what your intellect and what your ego is all about. This is how it starts in the very beginning, explaining about yourself first and all the problems that you experience once you start leading the life in the so-called world, and how you evolve as a person. And once you get a bit of clarity as to where you are, because most of us live in our home, we live in the society, but we actually aren't living over there. We are kind of dead. So by the study of yoga, you get to build a kind of awareness that makes you feel alive, which is very, very important. It's one of the main reasons why you have to study the text of yoga. And once you get this deeper insight, and once you feel like, okay, you're alive, then the entire text guides you, okay, what are the different practices that you have to do, which path you have to follow, because there are different paths of yoga. Remember one thing in your life, there's no such thing as styles of yoga. That is probably most stupidest thing I've ever heard. So there are different paths of yoga. You have the karma marga, you have the gnana marga, you have the raja marga, you have the bhakti marga. These are the 4 predominant paths that usually people follow to this particular day, if you're watching this in 2023 for that matter. So have this in mind. There's no such thing as styles of yoga. If ever you come across a person who says, okay, I practice this style of yoga, it's probably the stupidest thing that you would have ever heard from a yoga enthusiast. You can't. There's no such thing as styles of yoga. There's different parts of yoga. In fact, each chapter of Hatha Yoga is known as a yoga. Different parts. But I'll get into that in the later discussion. But if you're following the text of Yoga Sutras, here the sage Patanjali mainly speaks about 2 of them. One is the Ashtanga Yoga and one is the Kriya Yoga. Very specifically, he mentions what is Ashtanga Yoga and what is Kriya Yoga. These are the only 2 parts of yoga that is being mentioned in the text of yoga, which is the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Once you start gaining clarity about what you are and how you function, how your mind works, how your intellect works, and to what level you have ego, then you start to understand, okay, which path you have to choose. If you don't understand your mind, if you don't understand how you think, if you don't understand your ego, it doesn't matter which path you choose, at the end, you'll feel lost. This is the most common mistake you make. Before you choose a path, you have to at least have some basic understanding or insight as to how your mind functions, how you think, and where your ego predominantly exists. If this is not happening, it's ultimate chaos over here. And the best example is the kind of education you get these days. By the time you turn 20 or 22 and you come out of the university, you're more lost than before. At least you had some sense of clarity when you were 18, once you entered the university, and then you study all the garbage that needs to be studied, and then you're more lost than ever. Probably one or two people gain clarity, but rest of them, they're lost. That's not the purpose. Same way here, it's very essential for you to understand the mind, understand how you think, understand where your ego lies, and then you choose a path. Okay, I want to choose a path of action. You go to Karma Yoga. If you're someone who is very intellectual, you choose the path of knowledge, which is Gnana Yoga. You choose the path of will. If you're very dynamic, go for Raja Yoga. If you're a very devotional person, go for Bhakti Yoga. If you're someone who has this empathy and sympathy from a very young age, I never had that, by the way. For someone who has this empathy and sympathi, please go ahead. Bhakti Marga is the path for you. So the entire second chapter is all about the study of the different paths. But in the Yoga Sutras, mainly Ashtanga Yoga and Kriya Yoga. And once you start to evolve as a human, once you start using different parts of the brain that's been unused for years together, or probably lifetimes together, a lot of instincts naturally starts to come from within you. This is what we call as supernatural powers, or what we call as siddhis. Siddhi means supernatural power. This is not fictional. Mark my words when I say this. Siddhis are what we call as supernatural powers in the path of yoga. These are not fictional or made up terms. This does exist. If you read the very famous book called as Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda very clearly explains how he met sages who even to this day live in the mountains, who have this supernatural powers. The same way, the entire third chapter explains all the different supernatural powers, which I'll be sharing with you over the time. These are for real. This exists for real. If you grow on the path of yoga, you do all the sadhana, all the practices that needs to be done, even you will be bestowed with the supernatural powers. It doesn't matter which part of the world you're from, which caste or creed you belong to. The only thing that matters here is, okay, you're a human. You're a human, and that's all that matters. Being born as a human, having a human mindset, having a human body and a functioning intellect, you'll get to know, okay, my limitations are endless. And by regularly practicing, you'll also reach a state where you'll understand, okay, I'm limitless. In fact, there's this movie called Limitless. I think Bradley Cooper plays the lead role in it. If you read the entire third chapter of the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, you'll understand very well, how this entire movie plays out. If you and how this actor Bradley Cooper gets a lot of supernatural powers, or his skills reach the highest level. It's unimaginable, and he enters into this top 1% of the people in the world who can do anything, and hence named as limitless. Exactly what the third chapter talks about. And the fourth chapter, this is very interesting. Why would anyone want to do the practice and go ahead after they have the supernatural power? What is it I'm trying to say? You start to work, okay? And then you start to make money. Once you start to make money, you start making shit ton of money. You have a lot, and lot keeps flowing in. You probably make crores and millions and whatever. If you truly understand the purpose of life, you won't stop there. Because money is not the main intention for you to come into existence. If you're someone who understands this, you'll use money to free yourself from the money. And then you'll start to develop an understanding which is beyond money. The same way, you start your practice on yoga. You progress over the last 10 years, 15 years. You are able to do a lot of things. Your instincts become razor sharp. You've acquired a lot of supernatural powers. But this is not the purpose of you starting the yoga sadhana, of you starting the yoga practice. The main intention of you starting the yoga practice first, so that you understand and truly realize who you are, and you reach this state of realization, what in the Yoga Sutra we call as Kaivalya. You've heard of the term called nirvana, right? Like Buddha calls the ultimate state of realization as nirvana, and you've heard of Mahasamadhi, you've heard of moksha and whatever. Same way, in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, this state is called as Kaivalya. So the last chapter of the text of Yoga Sutra is about Kaivalya. What does this chapter say? It says, okay, you have all the supernatural powers now. Even these supernatural powers have limitations, like how money also has limitations. But by not having it, you shouldn't say, okay, I know it's a limitation. Have everything that's needed. There's a lot of supernaturals, like how I told you about this book, right? There, the author, the one who wrote the autobiography of a yogi, he explains where he once met a sage where when he just snapped his fingers, fire used to come out in between the fingers. So, like this, there are a lot of supernatural powers. But that's not the purpose why you started yoga or why you started the sadhana. You didn't start the journey on the yoga because you wanted to, think what the other person thinks, or so that you can manipulate the other person's thinking, or you get to know what is happening in a distant land just if you close your eyes and then think about it, or you just close your eyes, suspend the life in this body, enter into another life. This is called as parakaya pravesha, which even Shankaracharya did, long ago. All these are supernatural powers, but these powers have a limitation. What is it? It is an obstacle for you to not see the clear picture of what the entire journey of being a human is all about. See, we are born as humans so that we break this cycle of being a human. Yeah, mark my words when I say this. This is the true fact. You're born as human so that you end this cycle of birth and death. If you get stuck to the supernatural powers and say, okay, out of thin air, I can bring in a mango, or I can bring in an apple. I have these supernatural powers. I can light the lamp with just a blink of an eye. Good. You may say, okay, Harsha, you don't even have this. How can you talk? I don't have this. Yeah, I understand that. But by time, it will come if you keep on doing the sadhana, keep on doing the practices that needs to be done. But there is a limitation for even this. But after you do all this, then you say, okay, nah, this thing doesn't make any sense. So you leave that, and then you go to the next stage of life, or the next stage of practice, what we call as Kaivalya, where the entire text of Yogasutras explains as to how you evolve and reach this final state of emancipation. This is what the entire text of Yogasutras is all about. The text of Yogasutra dates back 1500 to 3500 years. Each historian gives a different date for this. Usually, most of them these days say it's three and a half thousand years old. But as I said, there's a very nice book called The History of Sanskrit Literature. I'll put the link in the description. There, each historian dates back the text of Yogasutras based on their own perception and their own understanding. So usually we say, okay, it's anywhere between 2000 to 3,500 years old. See, when the text of Yogasutra came into existence, we didn't have a manuscript back then. There was no printing media like this. Everything was orally transmitted from the student to the teacher. And if something is passed on from the student to the teacher, we have to make sure the knowledge is concise, right? You can't read a huge textbook and say, okay, remember each and every word of it. Within a few months, when this same knowledge is passed to another person, it will be lost. That's why the entire text of yoga was written in the form of sutras, what we call as formulas. Formulas are easy to remember, and you can't go wrong with formulas. 196 formulas, 196 sutras were written, and it was very concise, small, and you can very easily remember the formulas. It doesn't matter how old the text is, you can't go wrong with respect to understanding the formulas and orally repeating it. This is the reason the entire text of Yogasutras was written in the form of formulas, and the entire text was compiled into 196 sutras. And if I say, see, the sanctity, the purity of the text is the same as it was, 2.5 or 3,000 years ago, you don't have to doubt it. Why? Because the text was written in such a way so that the meaning of the text is not lost. When you write in the form of shloka or verse, over the years, each individual comes up with their own interpretation. But formulas, it's definitely not possible. So what you're reading, the Yogasutras of Patanjali, it's in the form of sutras, is exactly how the text came into existence back when it was, handed on to the sages. You don't have to doubt about this. This is what the entire Yogasutras of Patanjali is all about. For all those who wish to understand or gain clarity with respect to life, wanting to start the journey of the Yogasutras, here's where you can start. There's a very nice book called Yogasutras of Patanjali, written by B.K. Iyengar. He explains everything with respect to the perspective of asana. Give this a read. I'll share the link for this in the description. I hope this was informative. Do let me know what you felt in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.